Does your anxiety sometimes hit whoosh out of the blue? You might have been walking along just fine, not even thinking about anything making you anxious, and all of a sudden you're just filled with anxious feelings. So there is a reason that this can happen really underneath the surface. So we are not even consciously aware. And there's a good reason for it. I'm going to share it with you today. So often we are told that anxiety starts with your thinking. You must have been thinking about something anxious. There must be something happening in your life that makes you anxious. And this can be so frustrating and so invalidating for those people who get hit with somatic anxiety, somatic being in the body. And very often, the people who experience their anxiety that way get really frustrated, feeling that the tools shared by everybody, whether they are therapists or YouTubers or whoever is sharing the tools on how to get over anxiety, it feels like it doesn't relate. So I want to help you make the connection between the way you experience anxiety and how these tools can help you. And let's start by talking about subconscious memories. So, very intense experiences, mostly in childhood, but really at any point in our life, intense experiences get linked in our memory bank with the physiological feelings we were having at the time. So this can happen with positive memories and it can happen with very negative and very upsetting memories. But our hippocampus, which is one of the key parts of our brain that does memory, encodes our memories with sights, sounds, feelings, tastes, and not always a full story. So, on the positive side, there could be a particular smell, the smell of cinnamon, or something that your grandmother cooked that brings you a lot of pleasure, or it could even be the way that the landscape feels and smells when there's the first snow. So you might have a lot of positive memories. And when those things recur, you feel that, right? And sometimes it might link to an actual memory, but not always. But with really traumatic memories, they often get embedded in our memory banks without the story at all. So for big T or little t traumas, we can have memories encoded that don't hit our conscious mind. And those things can get triggered and then trigger physiological feelings. And this can really feel like it's totally out of your control, which then makes you feel like you have no control to stop it or change it. So let me give you a little more information about this link, and then we'll talk about what you can do about it. So the link between the sensory information and the emotional response, it can be extremely strong, and it gets stronger based on how often you've had that response. So it gets stronger over time. And then also the initial trigger events, how intense they were, will make that bond stronger and stronger. And I can just hear a few of you saying that something's happened to you pre-verbally, you don't have memory of it. And this works in the same way. And the way to begin to address it is similar. So pre-verbal memories can also get encoded that way and trigger some of these feelings. And so just a minute to delve into the concept of consciousness, because consciousness means to be aware. And this is actually a very controversial word. So a lot of people have a lot of different definitions of it. But I think it's helpful to think about consciousness on a spectrum so that it can go from sort of like just sort of sensory information that comes in without your cognitive awareness, without your frontal lobe thinking language centers. Sensory information comes in, it impacts you. So that would be sort of subconscious in some people's minds, but it's really at the very beginning of consciousness because there is a part of you that is conscious of that, right? It takes that sensory information in. And then on the other side of this scale is full cognitive awareness. And you might be aware of the whole package. You can think about it, you can remember it, you can see what's happening now, and you can feel the sensory information. So our consciousness goes along a pretty wide spectrum, and all of it impacts us. So let's look here on the screen at an anxiety cycle that starts with sensory information coming in and impacting your feelings, whether it's emotional or physical feelings or both. That's where it feels like it starts. And then from there, it probably goes into anxious thoughts. And then it also can go into anxious behaviors. And then those anxious thoughts and those anxious behaviors increase the anxious feelings. So, a key thing to keep in mind here is that you might not be able to stop that initial zap to your feelings. You may not be able to stop the intake of that sensory information because you might not even be consciously aware of it, right? So that initial trigger and those initial feelings might still happen. However, this is where you can then intervene so you don't continue the cycle in a way that will make it worse. And I know that might not be the answer you want. You want the answer of like, how do I stop those triggers? And there are ways to do that. That does take a lot of work. And I do think that EMDR therapy is a great way to do that. But there are things you can put in place. And even if you do something like EMDR therapy, there are things you'll need to put in place to slow that whole cycle down. So the key is to understand how this cycle works for you, to really investigate and think about this. So think about after that anxious feeling arises for no reason, what happens next? Here's an example. Whoosh, those anxiety feelings come in, and then you think, what is wrong with me? I will never get better. And then all sorts of negative core beliefs can be under that, such as I'm defective, I'm in danger, I can't trust anyone, I can't trust doctors, something really bad must be happening if I feel this way. Right? So even if it starts with those feelings, where do your thoughts go? And those thoughts are usually driven by our negative core beliefs. And I do have a PDF that I developed utilizing some EMDR therapy techniques as well as some other things to help you drill into what your negative core beliefs are. And then it gives you 3 ways to overturn them. So, free PDF, you can download it. The link will be in the description, and I think I can put a link probably over here, but I think that could be really helpful for you. And then, in addition to thinking through where do your thoughts go after you get hit by that feeling, where do your behaviors go? Do you jump into a behavior that might actually make your anxiety worse, even though it might feel like it temporarily makes it better? But the types of behaviors that make anxiety worse are either compulsive or avoidant. So, avoiding something that scares you and you have anxiety about temporarily makes you feel a little bit better, but it's actually really convincing that old part of your brain, oh, yeah, we really do have to be afraid of that. So it will continue this cycle. And then compulsive behaviors, whatever those happen to be, but an example could be going online and Googling some health symptoms, again, might temporarily make you feel a little bit of relief. Oh, I'm doing something about it. But then you end up down one of those rabbit holes and it actually continues the cycle and makes the anxiety worse. So, what's the solution? This is the solution, okay? It really is. So I know you want to knock at those triggered anxiety feelings, but let's just say right now you can't control them. Then what to do is where you go after you have those. What if, when those anxious feelings hit, if you could sort of say, well, it's happening again. I really dislike these feelings. I really do wish they'd go away, but they're here, and I don't have to look for any other reason for them. I know they're my anxiety symptoms, and I do know there's a few things I can do that will help them get better. So, in effect, you're accepting that you're having that feeling, but you're not attributing it to anything other than, "Ah, I got a trigger." Take a deep breath, move into one of the physiologically relaxing techniques that are healthy and that you can use. And if you didn't see the video I did last week, I went into some of those techniques and I also went into all of the possible physical symptoms that do come from anxiety, even though sometimes it can be hard to believe that this symptom is actually from anxiety. But it can impact our entire bodies. So if you are curious about How do I know that this symptom is due to anxiety? You can look at that video and also to go into a little bit more detail on the techniques to physiologically calm your body. So, the key here is that you might not be able to stop that initial hit of anxiety, but you can stop the cycle. And as you do that, you will develop more and more agency over the anxiety. You'll develop more facility in using some of the diaphragmatic breathing tools, the grounding techniques. And if you can see it as a process, not as a like, oh, I put in 3 days of work and boom, I want it done, which I understand, I really do. But as a gradual process, it will gradually get better. And as you're able to really calm your nervous system, really strengthen your parasympathetic nervous system over time, those triggers won't hit you as hard. And then if you do have traumatic memories, working with an EMDR therapist, I don't do direct therapy with people anymore, but that can be so helpful. And you can process even preverbal memories or things that you only remember vaguely can actually be processed so that you will not be as sensitive to that sensory information. But as I said, that takes time. And in the meantime, see how you can access these tools to cut the cycle. All right, let me know what you think of this video. Let me know if you have questions or another topic you'd like me to address. If you got value out of this today, please do hit that like button. It's a big help for me. And subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed. Okay, thank you so much. See you next week.